Welcome to the final part of my set of videos adapting all the reviews I've written on my blog in 2023. I keep most of them limited to exactly 50 words, and I've already listed all such reviews in the previous videos. Now it's time to look at the few games that gave me much more to say, that aren't LEGO or From Software related. I've already covered those in my videos on said topics. So far, only 3 other games that I first encountered this year have inspired me to write at length like that. Bastion, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Jurassic World Evolution 2. These in-depth critiques aren't exactly essays, but still longer than the 250 words I used to set for my reviews. I have no further introduction that I haven't already said in the other review compilation videos, so here we go. These are my initial reactions to those 3 games, explained in a few hundred words each. To be precise, 400, 780, and 450 respectively. Bastion. My experience with this game was interesting, to say the least. When I started watching a long play, as I often do to sample games before potentially buying, my first impression was that the graphics were nice and colourful, the music was good, and the idea of the paths forming before you as you advanced was a novel idea. But I very quickly grew to despise the narrator's monotonous running commentary. I got so annoyed by his ceaseless reciting and occasionally criticizing the player's actions that after less than 20 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. So I took off my headphones and watched the rest muted. I never found his remarks funny or endearing, and I couldn't even bring myself to care about the story or details of the world because it was all indigestively delivered through that obnoxious narration. That one creative decision almost single-handedly ruins the whole experience. Then I found out that the narration could be lowered to 0, so I took advantage of the Steam summer sale to play the game myself as a purely visual experience. After all, I didn't want the long play to bring me to an unfair conclusion, a scathing review based on the narration alone. However, the narration turned out not to be my only grievance. I also had issues with the gameplay itself. The mouse controls and isometric perspective kept throwing me off, so I'd often end up attacking or evading in the wrong direction. And no, the game wouldn't register any controllers I tried to connect. I know that's more on me than the game. I suck at video games, I make no allusions to the contrary, but that's part of the reason it drove me nuts when enemies would gang up on me or spam attacks so much that I couldn't keep up. There was one area with a huge flood of enemies where I lost almost all my lives, and that was just in the first hour. If it was only going to get harder from there, I knew I wouldn't stand a chance. So I did something I've never done before on Steam. I requested a refund. To sum up, I know I'm in a minority on this, but I flat out didn't like this game. It looks and sounds nice, but I found the control unintuitive, and the narration turned the experience from arduous to downright unbearable. My rating? 2 stars. P.S. I discovered later that my controller issues were probably because I had the options disabled in Steam, but I still don't care enough about the game to give it another try. Red Dead Redemption 2. Set 12 years before the events of Red Dead Redemption, making this a prequel, not a sequel, you play as Arthur Morgan, a member of the Van der Linde gang on the run from the law and rival gangs. I still maintain that the first Red Dead Redemption is one of the most tedious and annoying games I've ever played, a prime example of a game that I hate but everyone else loves. I could only hope that this follow-up would be at least a slight improvement, so I watched a walkthrough, or rather a game movie showcasing 19 hours of cutscenes and in-game dialogue, to see if I'd be interested in playing it myself. From a technical standpoint, the game is a marvel. The graphics are A1, and it exchanges the first game's desert setting for much more picturesque snowscapes, mountain forests, and cities. On top of that, you have several conditions to keep track of, including the bond with your horse, your weight and stamina changing depending on how much you eat, animal carcasses decaying, and even your hair growing realistically over time. Impressive systems to include, yes, but there are times when adhering to realism isn't entirely necessary. Some have criticized these features for limiting player freedom, and I can understand why. But as far as I'm concerned, technical achievements are all for naught if the story isn't to my taste. So is this one? The answer is yes and no. It's not like the first game, which gave you a simple goal that ostensibly should have been attainable straight away, but kept dragging its feet with contrived reasons to keep you from reaching it, to the point where I was pleading for it to just end already. No, this game doesn't really have a plot, or so it seems at first. The gang's goal is merely to survive and make enough money to secure their retirement. Unlike the first game, everything you do is clearly and unequivocally a means to that end. Unfortunately, you spend so much time on those tasks that the game feels stagnant, and I began to sorely feel its length. At some point during the Saint Denis section, I finally lost patience and watched a story summary video to hear the rest. And I discovered that it was right after that all the interesting stuff started happening. The events that unfolded afterwards sounded incredible on paper, but I got the distinct impression that there was still a lot of filler in between. There's nothing wrong with a slow burn, but this one, for me at least, is far too slow. Now, obviously, to talk about the aforementioned events too much would mean getting into heavy spoilers, but let's just say the narrative explores themes like morality and loyalty in a way that in other circumstances would have made for outstanding drama. I've no doubt that I would have loved it if I'd even remotely latched onto the characters before that point, and if the mind-numbingly sluggish pacing hadn't long since killed my interest, however slight it may have been. Speaking of which, I mostly felt pure apathy for the characters. Again, I love what they were going for with certain characters' arcs, but I didn't find them remotely engaging before then. I'm extremely uncomfortable with the idea of robbing or assaulting people and actively performing those actions through gameplay, so I have no interest whatsoever in playing as a character who gets into such situations regularly. Now, the game does its best to paint the protagonists in a positive light regardless. The Van der Linde gang never pushes harder than necessary, they look out for each other, and under Dutch's benevolent leadership, do seem to function as a family. It also makes sure to portray their opponents as so much worse by comparison. In particular, the government agents on their trail are complete slimeballs who seem to sadistically enjoy provoking them. So it's clearly trying to make the gang seem like the preferable option. It is a testament to how little inclination I have to play as a criminal that it doesn't work. So yes, it is better than the first game, but I still have no desire to own it. I can certainly see the appeal. I could potentially have viewed it as the masterpiece everyone else does. I desperately want to like this game, but I simply never warm to the characters, and its excessive length and protracted pacing was just too much for me, so I can't declare it any better than just okay. All in all, I'm still not a fan of this series, or Rockstar games in general. My rating? 3 stars. Jurassic World Evolution 2. I love the first Jurassic World Evolution, so I was curious to see what the sequel would do differently. For the record, I've installed every DLC except the Camp Cretaceous pack, because I haven't seen the show yet. Whereas the first game takes place across Las Cinco Muertes, the island chain that includes Isla Sorna from films 2 and 3, this time the main campaign spans the continental United States, following the events of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Said campaign is surprisingly short, you can complete it in a couple of hours. But as if to compensate, the game adds another story mode called Chaos Theory, which revisits events from the movies with the question in mind, what if the park had succeeded? As you'd expect, it expands on the first game by coming up with several new gameplay mechanics and features to add to your park. We'd be here all day if I tried to list them all, but one of my favourites is the ability to release dinosaurs via airlift, so you can save space and build just one hatchery for the whole park. I also love the ability to speed up or pause time, so you can shorten the frequent waiting or give yourself a moment to think. But not all of its creative decisions are welcome. I'm not a fan of the changes to the dinosaur incubation process, for example. One of my favourite methods in the first game was giving each individual a different skin pattern to easily tell them apart and perhaps name them accordingly. But here, because the dinosaurs are incubated in batches, they all look the same, but some might have a higher chance of having a particular personality trait. Also, in the first game, modifying a dinosaur's genome affects its rating, which in turn contributes to your overall park rating. But here, your park rating is judged strictly by how much money you make. So ultimately, I ignored the genetic modification system altogether, and felt so detached from the dinosaurs that I never felt inclined to name them. But I think the worst aspect of the gameplay is having the same small team of scientists in charge of everything. Research, incubation, medical treatment, even expeditions. It just slows things down, especially whenever they need to rest. Naturally, the selection of dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals is also greatly expanded. It even introduced me to some I'd never heard of before, like the pterosaur Marodactylus, the plesiosaur Styxosaurus, and the little tyrannosaur Moros intrepidus. In conclusion, it's a good follow-up, but I still prefer the first game by far. I'll take either game over the Jurassic World movies any day, though. My rating? 3.5 stars. Well, that's it. Even if you don't agree with my reviews, I hope you enjoyed them. In particular, after my less than glowing impressions of Bastion and Red Dead Redemption 2, you might be wondering just what games I do like. Well, I've mentioned several in the previous videos in this series, and I have a video listing my top 20 favourite games of all time, so if you haven't seen those yet, check them out if you'd like something a little more positive. From this point on, I'll be doing these compilations of first impressions reviews on a regular basis, most likely on the first Saturday of every month, like on my blog. So feel free to drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Take care.